person about our land and our river, and bringing solid and joined up biodiversity to our city. So that's my statement. So if there is any questions at all about anything that I can't answer, I know who in the crowd can answer it for you, so that's good. So I've been the network manager for the Avon Otakaro network for a few years now, and I took up the role when our dear friend Evan Smith became terminal with cancer.
So yours.
Whose phone that is. And somewhat reluctantly, at that stage we hadn't settled the global settlement and the land hadn't been secured in perpetuity, and the job hadn't been done. And I had been working alongside him as a volunteer for a number of years, so I knew what we were in for and what we needed to do. So I did reluctantly take on the job, and I said I'd do it for a year, but we're a few years past it now, but I'm still here. So anyway, so that's how this came about. So tonight I'm going to talk you through just a little bit about the history of Avon and the Red Zone, a little bit about what we do. I'm going to talk about the Red Zone and the bigger picture stuff, and then I'm going to talk about the wider catchment and actually the state of our river. And we'll finish up this evening with a bit of a workshop or a bit of a discussion about what we think we should all do to actually improve the health of our waterway. Okay, I'll stand next to that. Okay, right, so Avon Otakaro network came about after the red zoning of about 500 odd plus houses. There was a really strong wish for that land not to be rebuilt on, and for it to be turned into what we call a river park. And there's some people like Chrissy in the room here who were part of that in the beginning, and Sarah at the back. And so they set about getting the community behind the idea. So this is a piece of Christchurch history. This is the original map. Sorry. This is the original map. Now this map formed the basis of a petition that went up to Parliament. That petition was signed by 18,500 people, and it was taken from Rapaki across the estuary, up the river, into the council chambers and handed. Chrissy, can you remember who it was handed to? I can't remember. Was it Leanne? No, it was Leanne. So then it was flown to Wellington. It was handed to the Christchurch East MP at the time, which was Leanne Dalziel. So that kicked in motion 7 years of consultation, $20 million to come up with a map that looks similar to the one that was sent up. That's my joke. That's the only joke you can do. Okay. So, but in all seriousness, it kicked off the Regen Plan. And subsequently that Regen Plan went on to inform the District Plan, which informs the land uses in the Red Zone. Since then, we've had the Global Settlement, which was a document signed between the government and the city to hand the land back to the city with a little bit of money to help with the development of the Red Zone, which I'll get into in a bit more detail later. And it set in motion the setting up of the Co-Governance Committee, which is underway currently. So for our organisation, we actually sat back in 2022 and went, job done. let's have a party and move on. But the sad state of affairs is that we looked at that and we actually, there's a lot of work to do. Our river has essentially been used as a drain for 160 years. It's in not a very good state. And so there is a lot of work to do to advocate now for a river. So that's where we sit currently as an organisation. I'll come back to the Red Zone map. That's important. So just in a nutshell, what Avon Otakaro Network does is our role is to advocate and facilitate conversations for the stakeholders. And there's a lot of stakeholders. It's an unusual situation, and it's not a situation that you find very often in the world, where you've got people who've left their properties and they're grieving, the people that are left behind, and there's people in the room here that are directly living behind the Red Zone, and all the things that come with that. There's the people that advocated for the park. There's the interest groups, the ecologists, the city council, ECAN. So the stakeholders in mana whenua, the stakeholders in this are quite varied and quite wide. So there's a lot of facilitation that needs to take place. Our role, we see it, is to stay true to the vision of the forest park and to hold that vision, especially for those people that had to leave their properties. We do a lot of work around activating groups and smoothing the way to people to test ideas and to set up community gardens, do riparian planting and all that kind of thing. Over the years, we've really been focused on corridor-wide things, and before the land was handed over to the council, it was managed by LINS. And LINS is a land management company. They're not a community-led development company. So they were very much about managing the land. And what we saw in the beginning was farm fences everywhere, making it almost like you couldn't go onto the land. So some of the work that we did in the first instance, the very first job was as the houses were being demolished, the whole sections were being clear-felled of their trees and things. So we went and advocated for actually those demolitions to be done with a lighter foot to enable some of the trees to stay so that people could go back to their properties and breathe and have a marker to go back to. And as it turns out, in some places, those trees are really good nursery plants for the native plantings that go along. And another really important work in the beginning was to put in gateways, and you'll still see the gateways now. And we painted them white so that if people were in the middle of the red zone, they could see where to get out, where the access was. But thankfully, when the Christchurch City Council team came on as maintenance, the first thing we sat down with them and said was, why have we got farm fencing along the river? You're just having to spray under it. It's not accessible to people. It's on a closed road. So from there, the council staff, Sarah, were you involved? Removed all of the posts and all the fencing from the places that had closed roads and stuff, which made it a much nicer place to be in. So yeah, so we do a lot of work advocating and actioning things that are beneficial to everyone across the whole river. So with our change in lens, beautiful picture. So with our change in lens, I guess we're still doing our community development work and advocacy, but we're really looking at now building and supporting actions around biodiversity in the river. So one of our projects is in River Clean, which I'm going to talk about in more detail. We still work with a number of schools, both in the red zone and in the wider catchment, to get the schools that are walkable to their streams in the river engaged and being a bit of kaitiaki around the space. So collecting rubbish, doing riparian planting, doing vertebrate counts and things like that. We're supporting the Otakaro trapping project, which is run by Morgan in Revolution. And the idea behind that is that we want to create a virtual environment around the whole corridor for trapping pests and things, which will help with planting and establishing biodiversity. And we've just embarked on a big management plan idea around the Dudley Stream. So the Dudley Stream has really been hammered by a lot of work to fix Foxton Basin. So there's a heap of sediment built up. There's a heap of big developers developing houses along the stream who have ruined the banks and a lot of rubbish, and the stream is not moving and the habitat is pretty poor. So we've just started a working group around the stream so that we can then go and take that to the council and we can around setting up a management plan to improve it. So we do a lot of advocacy and forums still, and a lot of events and awareness about the river. I'm going to move fast now because we're out of time. I just want to talk about our in-river clean. So with that shift in lens, we thought, what can we do that's going to be immediate, give us an understanding. So we decided, we actually got approached by Daryl in the boat, and he tried to set it up with ECAN and the council, and they both kind of pushed him back. So he landed on our desk, and we said, oh yeah, we can sort that out. Well, we went to the council and ECAN, and ECAN went, council's problem. Council went, it's ECAN's problem. So we went, oh well. So we set up the project, and then since then we've been supported really well by the Community Waterways Partnership, and George from you, and also from the Zone Committee to help that project. So in that time since October 2022, we've pulled out 7 tonnes of rubbish. We've diverted 50% from landfill, and that's all down mostly to Kate, who is our rubbish queen.
Yeah.
And we've been working with schools as much as we can to help us do the diversion so that they can start the learning around how our drains are connected to our river. So this has been a really important project for us to kick off the work around improving the waterways. A lot of the rubbish that we're seeing is old, like real old. And I feel like we're starting to see a change. Are we, Kate?
There's always much really old, dirty glass.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Still a lot of old glass. I feel like that's always quite new.
Yeah. So we don't want to do this forever. We would like to get to a stage where it's just a maintenance thing and we can advocate for it to be a maintenance thing. But in the meantime, we're collecting really good data around what we're collecting, where we're collecting it, how it's coming in, how old it is, all that sort of information. So it's really important. So, red zone. Let's talk about the red zone. So as I said, this regen plan, which now has no legal legislation around it, informs the district plan, which is the land use around the red zone. Now, the red zone is a really important piece of work to help us with our river and getting our river healthy. The whole basis behind it is returning it to a wetland. So during that consultation process and what you see in the paper and all that kind of stuff, you often see the fun stuff like the Eden projects or the things. But the reality of it is that just the restoration and the stormwater basins are enough and a really good thing for our city. It's just that it's deeply boring and it's not fun.
No, it's not.
So every single home and road and everything all flow into our river. Just about 3/4 of our whole city end up in the Otakaro. So setting up engineered stormwater basins, which is essentially what this is so essentially important for us to have a healthy river. So basically what happens with, there's probably people in here that go, I know this, but there might be people that don't, so I'm just going to cover it off. So you can see on this map, you'll see these grey areas. So all of these grey areas are basically wetland, but engineered wetlands. So the idea is that the water from our streets and our houses and our roads end up in these basins, and then the sediment and the contaminants sit, and the good water moves to the next basin before it ends up in our river. Then, every 20 or 30 years, depending on how bad it is, the sediments and things are scooped out and taken away. So the essentials behind the regen plan is around engineered stormwater basins and wetlands. Yes.
Is that what that one they've set up in your Brighton is?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Indeed, it is. Yeah. So you'll see in Pages Road, this very first one started. It came to a bit of a standstill because ECAN wouldn't give a consent for it because of the stormwater take, because the aquifer is so close to the surface. So that's what's delayed it, and it could be a problem for all of them. So they've started with, conscious time now, they've started down here. And it's sensible starting at this end because the New Brighton end is where we've got to protect our and it's all about protecting inert environments as well. So they're starting at this end and working their way back. So by the time we get to Avon or Richmond, it's probably likely in the way that they've been going 20 or 30 years away. But yeah, so the other important piece of the regen plan is the stormwater basins, but also the stop banks. So when we think of stop banks, we think of these big high things often. But the reality is that a lot of the stop banks now will be built quite low, but they'll be built further away from the river. So in our colonial wisdom, we came to Christchurch and we went, we must contain the river. It must go straight and it must have a hard edge. Rivers don't want to do that. Rivers want to move, meander, and as the conditions evolve. And so that's what's created a lot of the problems that we've got, is the fact that we tried to control the river. So this is an opportunity for us, in most cases, to allow the river to have room to move, to soften the edges, which is better for our species to spawn and repair and planting, but still protects our urban environment from flooding things. And the other third thing about the region plan is the ability to be a soak. So at the moment, or prior to the red zoning, we had flooding issues. Now, hopefully, as they move through this work, those issues will be resolved because there'll be more room for water to be captured and to become a bit of a soak. So that's the red zone. I just want to, before I move on to the wider catchment, I just want to talk about a few of the key things outside of those three things. Is that at the base near the estuary, there's a large area in Bexley which is going to be naturally restored. And if you go there now, before any work's taking place, you can actually see the foundry plants taking shape that are conducive to a saline environment. So it's already kind of doing that. You can tell that it's already happening. So the idea is between that big blue area is it'll be a bit of salt marsh. So it'll be a real saline freshwater type environment, and there'll be a bund opened up in the river to allow that water. And then the orange bits are areas where they've identified areas of really nice, rich growing soil. And pre-development, there was a lot of orchards and that type of market gardens in those areas because the soil is conducive to that. And then the purple bit is an activity zone. So Eden, you might have all heard, was the #1 contender for that, but they're not coming now. So yeah, so that might be a community Christchurch-led project or something. I don't know.
No tapu.
So it's really about activity zones. But I guess I'm trying to push the understanding is that the biggest activity is the cleansing of our urban environment before it hits the river, the protection of our properties from flooding, and obviously an opportunity for restoration and having a fantastic city and sea pathway we can all enjoy. So yeah, so that's red zone. But is the red zone the answer to our river's health? It was the topic of my speech. Okay, so the Otakaro catchment, as you can see, is way bigger than the red zone. There's tributaries and streams running all the way from Addington and Avon through the city. So those streams are experiencing all of that contamination from the urban environment as it comes through. So before we settled in Christchurch, what used to happen, so the Otakaro is actually a seepage from the Waimak. So the aquifers are all connected to the Waimak, and there's some rain that contributes to the water flowing into the Otakaro. So before we came along and settled the city, what used to happen can anyone tell me, is there no ecologists out there that can tell me every 30 years or so, the
Waimakariri would come up.
100
Yeah,
years?
it came through quite
Every now and
regularly.
then, the Waimak would flood, and the Otakaro would just simply be another arm of the Waimak. And what that would do is it would push the sediment and all that stuff out to sea, and it would actually keep the river clean. But the last time that happened was in 1868, and what it did is actually flooded the cathedral.
2
And
metres.
so,
Shock horror.
and it survived. So what happened after that was they went, we can't have that. We can't have the Waimak flooding the
Waimakariri.
Sorry. We can't have that flooding our town, so that's when the big bund was built that protects Christchurch from that happening. But the end result of that, plus 160 years of our cars and our houses and our poo and our dogs and our Canadian geese, we now have a river that is not flushed out. The sediment settles, and when that happens, our habitats get smothered. We get a lot of weed growing because we've got nitrates and phosphate and all those things landing in our river. From our cars and our houses, we've got copper and zinc and those sorts of things. Now, would anyone here jump in the river now and have a swim? What do you think would happen if you maybe jumped in and had a wee sip of the water?
Get sick?
Yeah, so imagine what it's like for an invertebrate, or a tuna, or a freshwater mussel. So it's just not an environment conducive to habitat. It's sick, and yeah, we need to do something about it. So, wind it all up. The current lay of the land is we've got this amazing project in the red zone to tackle some of these things, and then we've got a somewhat of a plan, and I'm sorry in advance to my council colleagues, a stormwater management plan that I believe is essentially just a tick boxing exercise to satisfy a consent with the county. There's nothing tying the two things together. There's no funding in the LTP to actually advance anything in the stormwater management plan. And the stormwater management plan is highly focused on sort of central city and beyond. The red zone is focused from Richmond and beyond, and then we've got this big gap in the middle where there's a big disconnect. The other thing I believe is that it's heavily reliant on the community to fix the problem at source. And what that means when I say at source is, because there's no infrastructure in place upstream to sort contaminants coming off the streets, it's heavily reliant on our communities to gob in developers, make sure we don't wash our cars in driveways, and all that kind of thing. So we're being relied upon to challenge those things at source, but again, there's no resources and support to do that. So, where does it leave us is the big question, in terms of moving forward on having a healthy river. For me, I don't think we have all the things in place that we need to do. So, I actually had this in my LTP presentation and I forgot to put the slide up. So we probably haven't got time to talk about so this is our city's logo. And we can have a full discussion about all elements of it, but the only element that I want to talk about is the fact that the Otakaro Avon River is the heart of our city. It connects pretty much 2/3 of everybody. And it's such an important visual and connector for health and well-being. If our river's not healthy, our people are not healthy. So it's such an important conversation for us to have. And I don't think we can point fingers at the council or ECAN. I think we collaboratively and collectively need to approach it in a way that we're all responsible for making sure that our river's healthy. So, my questions to you all are, I feel like I've missed something, but anyway. My questions to you tonight are, what do we need to do to protect it? Who's responsible? What's your vision for the river? What can we do to fix it? And what actions can you take personally? So, I'd like everyone to just take a moment, grab another drink, and talk amongst yourselves and your tables on these questions, and then we might just come back in 10 or 15 minutes to bring the discussion at the tables back to the room. But before we do that, is there any questions? Yes?
Is ECAN doing any research on overseas countries who have already put water catchments through their cities with high aquifers instead of they were quite afraid of it, you said, with the piece they already did. What there was research overseas they could learn from to help guide them.
I don't know now. Is anyone from ECAN here? Anyone that works with ECAN?
Not really to me.
No? I don't know.
It'd be a
I
good
can find out.
suggestion for them to do research instead of being afraid.
Yeah. I agree. Any other questions? Don't be shy. He's
I don't know how to answer people, but all of the little bits that you're doing with the ponds around the river, do you think that they will help with like climate resilience as well? So like as we're getting more floods and like higher tides and things like that, I'm just thinking about the one in New Brighton that could actually act as like, you know, if the tide and the flood will spill out and come back in instead of going into houses.
Oh yeah, they expected that.
Extra space to
yeah, so that's the bit I just missed, thank you. So I didn't talk about the adaptation aspects of things, and I guess what I wanted to say was that earthquakes were a 50-year advancement on adaptation in one event. So we've got a really cool opportunity here in Christchurch to be a bit of a leading the way in terms of managed retreat, chaotic retreat, I'd like to call it, and what adaptation looks like and the impact of it, because we've got to also, and Patrick will go on about this all the time, that everyone focuses on South Shore and Bexley and all that place, but actually there's places in Sydenham and
Yeah.
other parts
Whole
of the
city's
city.
dog tucker with
Yeah.
sea level rise. Don't
Yeah.
wipe out South Shore.
But it's not just that. So I think what we've got is a really cool opportunity to actually innovate and figure out how we can live with this, and actually do things that we can live with it rather than trying to retreat from it or push it away. Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's cool.
yeah. Anyone else?
That's like that topic, but they're still doing their rowing lake.
Oh, and I forgot about that too. Actually, that was really important. Thank you, Peter. So one of the big projects that's getting feasibility at the moment is the water sports, and so the problem they have is they only have a 1 kilometre two-way training stretch from here to Avondale Bridge, and it's really congested. And personally, I think losing the water community from the Otakaro would be really sad. There's other people that are other views, and I'm sure some of them in the room, but. So they're looking at a feasibility study to make it a one-way 2 kilometre training, because 2 kilometres is what you compete with. So that will take the river up to Avondale Bridge and then back down here into a loop, into a one-way loop. And we're already seeing in Kurz the river recovering or taking itself back. So all of their buildings are going to go across to the other side of the river. And then what that will leave us, that's if the ecology and mana whenua all stacks up, will be a really cool island, which would be a really cool eco-sanctuary for creating bird life and underswarming and things like that. So that's on the cards, and they're doing the feasibility on that at the moment. So, but whether the hydrology is, I don't know. Is any hydrologist? I have no idea. Yeah, and sorry, well, I've got this map up. The other big project that's talking, so there's lots of cool community projects like Revolution. And you'll hear about that next region. And Climate Action Campus are doing an amazing job restoring the old Avon Field site, and we've got some cool community things, community gardens in Dellington and Avondale. And the other big project is the Takeri Sanctuary, Eco Sanctuary, up in this whole bit up here. And so they're looking at long-term potentially fencing it so that they can start getting getting species breeding without pests. And then the whole idea behind that is you get the species breeding behind the fence, and then eventually they escape the fence and spread across the whole system. Yeah, and we don't have one. Christchurch doesn't have a sanctuary, and there's lots of debate around it, whether should it be in the red zone or perhaps the Port Hills is a better place for it. But I'm not going to debate that one tonight. Yeah, so they're the big things that are on the card. Sarah, anything else big on the card? No? Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. All right. So if you, I'll flip back to this one. So I'm super keen. At the end of May, we've got a network gathering at Turonga. So I invite you, if you're interested, you're doing work already, or you're an interest group, or you just want to support interest groups that are doing work along the whole catchment, to come along. But what this little session here will really help us inform that workshop as well. So in your groups, tables or whatever, mingle for about, say, like 10 minutes, charge your beers, and we'll come back to the room and hear what you think about these